hello, my name's Daisy. I'm going to be chairing today's event for you. My kind of day job is working at the British High Commission in Singapore in the Learning and Development team there, but I'm also a member of the BritCham Leadership and Talent Development Committee, and that's why I'm here chairing this event for you today on creating a culture of learning in your organisation. What a culture of learning is and how it manifests will be different in every single organisation and every situation. So today's event, we really just wanted to give you a few ideas and share a few experiences about what's worked for us in our organisations and give you an opportunity to speak to each other and share your ideas. So we'll be having our presenters, Vicky, Victoria and Lisa, telling us about what's happened in their organisations, and then we'll be going into breakout groups and I will explain a bit more about how that works then. But today's really just about sparking some ideas, and it's really about kind of sharing our thoughts and what might work in our organisations. You may have spotted that we don't have a formal question and answer session at the end in this event. So please do just add any in the chat as we go throughout, and one of us, the speakers, facilitators, and feel free to answer each other's questions as well. So just spark any thoughts and ideas and get the conversation going in the chat as we go through. But I think that's about it from me. You won't see much of me today. So I'll hand over now to our first speaker, who is Lisa.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here to share some initiatives that I led in my organisation that I hope will inspire you with lots of ideas and get you curious to try them out in your own organisations. So the two initiatives are Zoom Labs and what I called a digital shop house. So the one thing that I think both of these initiatives really showed to me and to my colleagues was that it's not just about the skills that you learn through these events, but it's also a lot about connecting with each other and the team bonding that comes out of it as a result. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you listen to more details of these two initiatives and just see that theme running all the way through. So the difference in initiatives, well, the Zoom Labs is more of a long-term program, if you like. It's once a week on a Wednesday, and this particular initiative ran for 12 weeks. The Digital Shop House, on the other hand, was a one-off event. So that was the difference. But as I say, again, it was the connection that was built and the team bonding that really was the cement of both these initiatives. So just to give you a bit of context about the Zoom Labs. So this Zoom Lab program started right at the beginning of COVID, and I'm sure all of you can remember that time. There was lots of anxiety. Especially in our team, we were quite a small team. There were a lot of people coming in and going out. There was lots of changes going on. And we were a team of highly experienced facilitators, but a lot of us had no or very little experience training and delivering online. So the thought of delivering all-day workshops or even 90-minute workshops on a platform like this was very nerve-wracking for a lot of us, and morale was quite low at that point, what with all the pressures of COVID. Of course, nowadays we've come out of that, and hopefully things are looking a bit more positive and people have got more used to it. But in this context, there was a real need for us to really rally together and come together in a regular time every week to help each other out. Now, I specifically chose Labs as the title of this initiative because Labs really was all about experimenting in a safe space. So what was the format? Every Wednesday, we'd come together for an hour. Sometimes it crept into an hour and a half because everybody was so excited to see each other. This was a time when a lot of us were stuck in our homes, isolated, although quite frankly, I'm still in that situation now. So we had it on a Wednesday. Wednesday was a good day for us. And I think, I'm also very aware of practicalities of these types of initiatives. Wednesday was good because it was the lightest in terms of delivering training. So we could all come together at a really good time in the week. It was the midpoint. And we would experiment with the Zoom platform. Now, before we went into the 12-week session, there was a lot of pre-work that was done. There was a lot of planning. So, for example, I sent out an email to all the trainers and said, okay, we're going to have these Zoom labs. What topics would be most useful for you? What would you be interested in? Because the idea is to rotate. So I kind of set up a buddy system whereby one facilitator would buddy up with another. One would be the main host and the other would be the co-host. And that was really good because then they could get together onto a topic that they were really interested in, plan it together, experiment and practice before we met on the Wednesday. So they needed a bit of time to do that. So I sent out that sign-up sheet quite a lot in advance to when we actually started the 12-week program. So by the time we started the first one, we had a 12-week course planned out. All of the facilitators had signed up to when was a time that was appropriate to them. Of course, you'd always get someone that can't make it or do it. And I kind of took it for the team and said, right, if that happens, then I'm going to step in. So that's what we did. But I didn't need to do that. Everybody was really raring to go. And I think that's also an important part of creating that type of learning culture, is to get people excited about the initiative. So we talked about it a lot. I went into management meetings and talked about what I was planning to try and drive a bit of energy around it. Okay, so 12 weeks, once a week, an hour lab. And we did a rotation. Now, that was great because it empowered everyone. They had choice in what they spoke about. The next point, and I think this is quite important, is capturing the learning. So, example, 2 trainers were facilitating a session on giving instructions effectively over Zoom. They prepared something. They might have had a dry run before the actual session with a couple of us that were free. And then we would come in on the Wednesday and we would have that session and we would run it as if we were participants. A dry run, a pilot runs when they had to go out and do that for real with paying clients. This was a great safe space. People could ask questions. And at the end, every facilitator was encouraged to get that material, those slides and those moments that they captured from Q&A sessions, and actually put that onto a shared folder. In this case, it was Teams. So that was labelled. Each session was recorded. And we captured the learning in that way as a way to go back to those materials and for it to be used as a resource for the facilitators. I think it's also important to mention that it wasn't just the facilitators themselves that were involved in these Wednesday Zoom labs. It was also getting the managers involved, getting the client managers to come along and have a look so that they could better understand the learning environment that we were then selling out to clients. So it wasn't just exclusive to the facilitators, it was trying to involve everybody. As with all learning, I think you have to think about what could have been better. So what could have been better for those Zoom labs, I think, what reflecting back was we could have captured the learning a bit better, a bit more efficiently. So it started off okay, but then it kind of drifted away and people would come and do their session and then those resources wouldn't get uploaded and then we wouldn't go into those shared resources and really capture the learning. So I think something could have been done around that a bit more, recording what had happened, use those resources, maybe put them into weekly meetings that we had. And ask more questions and actually use those resources a bit more. If I could have had the program run a bit longer, then I would have done. I think there was still mileage in it, but of course, at that time, we were quite a reduced team. There wasn't much manpower, so we had to go out and actually work with clients. But I still felt that there was a bit of a need to work with smaller groups and go a bit deeper in some of the topics that we covered. So just thinking about a few of those things, like capturing the learning, and then what are you going to do with that as a follow-up? I think some of that could have been a bit better. So that was the Zoom labs. And then the digital shop house, it was just a one-off event. Actually, I think it was about 3 years ago, I was a member of the International Association of Facilitators, and they held an Asian conference in KL. And one of the sessions I attended was by a facilitator who had created this space that was almost like a fair. And it had lots of different stalls and stations around the room. And each stall had an activity, a learning activity set up with some instructions. And we all came into the room and we weren't given any rules as such. It was quite loose. We could go to whichever station caught our eye, and we could bump into people along the way, and we could try out the different tools and techniques. And I just loved this energy that it created. I loved the fact that I could walk around and choose what I wanted to try out. I loved the hands-on, tangible nature of it. And I thought, what a wonderful energy to create and then replicate in my own organisation. So this was a great time because Christmas was coming up. And I thought, okay, what better way to tie in this type of space, if you like, or event, and Christmas. So we came up with this concept of digital shop house. And the reason we did that was the shop house was a nod to the local Singapore context, and then digital because we wanted to encourage facilitators to experiment with more digital tools. So how that worked? Well, it didn't cost us anything. I found an empty classroom, training room, and I set up my 5 stations, my 5 tables. I added, it was a theme, it was a Christmas theme. So I added Christmas decorations. We had a little reading corner, recommended reading. So I put all the books that I'd been reading on facilitation for the past year onto this table, and people could come along, pick up the books and see what they liked. I had a little sticky wall. God, a sticky wall. Sorry, I'm just imagining that. I haven't used a sticky wall for so long. I had a sticky wall, the old-fashioned sticky wall with all the post-it notes. And that was to capture the learning. What did those stalls have on them? Well, they had different activities. I'm really in favour of cards. So they had different card activities that facilitators could try out in their workshops. And we had one table that had just tablets on it so that the facilitators could come and share their ideas either by video or audio message. Interestingly, the sticky wall was more popular than the tablets. People enjoyed the fact that they could stick a lot of post-it notes and it was displayed on one wall so they could see what other people had been writing. Of course, what comes to mind now is I can't say that, mural. Is that it? Mural. Well, I don't know why I'm having that problem. Mural, M-U-R-A-L, or the other one that's very similar, Miro. So you could use a digital platform, a digital version of a sticky wall as at, the same impact. Lost my trail of thought. Look at the notes. Format. So even better would have been, because this is a one-off event, it was at Christmas time. So this kind of speaks to the timing of these types of events. It was Christmas time. We were going into the holiday season and it just got forgotten. So it's that follow-up. What I really would have liked was that follow-up in the new year. So I think if I'd done it again, I would have had some kind of follow-up session just to capture all of the learning. So 2 initiatives. 1, the Zoom lab, create some momentum, have it the same time once a week, get everybody involved, empower them with some choice in what they present and talk about. The second initiative, Digital Shop House, a fair-like format where people can go in and try and explore and see what they like and experiment. So that's all from me. I'm going to hand over the baton to Vicky. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Lisa. That was great. Really fascinating. I'm going to take you on a little journey back in time that I hope doesn't date myself too much. When I first started my career in healthcare management, I was fresh out of university. And in fact, I remember being asked to interview why I wanted to join the graduate training program. And I told them that while I knew I had a good degree, I didn't feel like I was trained or experienced enough to start working in the real world. So starting the NHS management training scheme, I was successful at that interview, was quite a steep learning curve. And many of us on the program were very fresh, very green graduates thrown into the deep end of operational management in a large and very complex system. We had experienced line managers that knew what to expect from us and helped us settle into our roles and expose us in challenges along the way. But as a cohort of 7 trainees in the northwest of England, we came together regularly as part of our postgraduate study. And it was there that we were introduced to the concept of action learning sets. Now, action learning sets sometimes get a bit of a bad press for being over-facilitated and overly structured programs, but they don't have to be like that, and it's certainly not been my experience. And while it's true that there is a formal structure to action learning, there's plenty of room for inspiration and sharing growth. So for those that don't know, action learning is essentially a structured process of group coaching. It's made up of a group of peers who commit to meeting on a regular basis to help each other solve their own problems. When the group comes together, a member of the group would normally express that they'd like some airtime to discuss an issue that they're dealing with. And that presenter then takes a short 5 minutes to present their problem or challenge without any interruptions. So at that point, the members of the group are practicing active listening. And usually the rest of the group will then ask open questions to unpick the problem. Questions like, what's stopping you from taking the next step? Which key stakeholders can you engage with for support? Can you tell us more about how this is affecting your team? These are all open questions. And this type of questioning encourages the presenter to consider things from a different perspective, maybe get creative about how they are approaching the issue. And then the members of the learning set can also reflect back to the presenter what they've heard and reflect on how the presenter has described the issue. There's more learning there about how things are being perceived. And then beyond these coaching questions and reflection tools, there's sometimes an optional gift section. And at this point, the rest of the group may go on to offer resources or offer ideas and reflect on their own similar experiences, but they're still strictly not supposed to give advice. And the presenter listens and takes notes, but doesn't respond. And then finally, there's the action part of action learning. The presenter commits to doing something about their issue or challenge and is expected to feedback on their progress and the steps they've taken at the next meeting. Now, in this way, the presenters gathered valuable support and a dedicated, safe space to think differently and potentially alter their mindset about the issue that they're facing. And they've committed to taking the next steps to move the issue forward with a level of accountability from the rest of the group. So my own experience of the action learning process was very challenging to begin with, and it was hard not to ask someone for their opinion or for their answer of what I should do. I mean, the whole point of action learning is that your group should challenge you to discover your answers for yourself. And it's based on the premise that no one knows the intricacies of your workplace dilemma quite like you do. And as a group member, you're developing the skills to ask open questions and hold back from giving advice. That in itself is a great leadership development tool. So by asking me open questions and challenging me to view my own workplace dilemma from a different perspective, my group supported me to discover for myself what I was finding hard about my dilemma and to identify actions and opportunities that I did feel comfortable to take for myself. As an Action Learning Set group, we've supported each other's personal and professional development for over 20 years, which is quite unusual. And in one case, just to give you some examples of some of the things we may have dealt with, one of the group members had uncovered some pretty serious breaches of performance and quality, but didn't feel that they were in a position to challenge the status quo in the organisation. And then our Learning Set group challenged them to consider the cost of doing nothing, consider the chain of command available to them. And ultimately, the presenter gained in confidence for themselves and in their position, and came to the conclusion that it was not their burden alone, and they committed to take action to address the issue. Now, clearly not every issue that comes to a learning set for discussion is as confronting as that example, and as a group, over the years, we've supported each other through multiple job applications, cases of bullying and managing difficult relationships, making difficult restructuring decisions, and career development pathways as well. As a group, we've been on a journey through each other's careers, and we're able to reflect and remind each other of how far we've each come. Among the group now, we've had people leave the NHS for consultancy work and then come back into the NHS. We've had people travel and work overseas in healthcare and other industries. We've had people take career breaks, and we've supported them through their development in that role. We've had one person work in the private health sector, which is a great opportunity to challenge a group of public sector workers. And as our careers have ebbed and flowed, we now count among us a CEO of a hospital trust, a head of organisational development at another major hospital, 8 children, 3 weddings, and 1 official Learning Set dog. And the fact, when I shared that I was going to take part in this event, I asked the group for their thoughts on how we've lasted so long as a group. Like I say, 20 years as a group of a learning set is quite unusual. One of the members said that she put it down to the deep trust that we've built over the years. And this is a group that she shared her deepest insecurities with, both personally and professionally. And that was developed through our intensive shared experience. My point being that when you foster a culture of peer learning and provide the space for vulnerability to support and challenge in a safe and trusted environment, you not only create an environment that benefits your employees as individuals, but also for your organisation to benefit from the development of leadership skills, and problem solving, coaching skills, asking open questions, and active listening. So, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of learning sets from my own personal experience, and I'm really looking forward to the group breakouts where we can support each other to take next steps in our own peer learning journeys. I'm going to wrap up and hand over to Victoria, who is going to share how we can prepare ourselves to be open to peer learning.
Thank you very much, Vicky, and hello everyone. And congratulations everyone, because you've just got a new job. Each of you has just got a new job. And I'm going to read to you the description of this new role and a task that you're all going to be undertaking. So you've just joined a new company, and every single colleague at that company is also new to the company. Your manager, by the way, is brand new as well. And all of you joining this company, all you're bringing with you is your transferable skills. You've never had a role like this before. So you're about as fresh and green as it comes. You are told, upon taking this new job, that in 3 weeks' time, you're going to be presenting to some new customers. You're going to be presenting to around 800 new customers per day. And these new customers, you're not going to have any opportunity to actually speak with them beforehand or learn anything at all about them before you present to them in 3 weeks' time. 800 customers per day. You also, the material that you're presenting, you are going to be given a little help in terms of the content. in that presentation. However, during the presentation itself, you will not be allowed to consult with your colleagues. It's going to have to be kind of done from memory, word for word. You've got to be word perfect by the time you get to that presentation. That's how we do things around here. So you've really got to get super prepared, because we're not going to be able to stop and question with our colleagues about what comes next. And there are no other real processes in place to create this presentation. However, that's going to be up to you to figure that out. As I said, the clock is ticking. Best go and get ready for that presentation. How do you feel with this prospect of this new job that I've just awarded to you? I mean, I don't know if anyone wants to put a word in the chat. I'd be baffled. I'd be terrified, panic. Oh, thanks, Simon's panicked. I love to write panic in people that join our calls. Yeah, there definitely would be a sense of panic, confusion, fear, stress. That's word stress that pops up certainly every week in my life. Well, let me tell you, this new job that you've just got, this is theatre, my friends. This is effectively what we do in my world of theatre, because when I'm not training and coaching, I'm a theatre actress. Because every time we get a role, we bring our little bag of actor transferable skills and we join together this brand new, fresh group of people who've never worked together before. Right? In 3 weeks' time, we're going to meet our customers, the paying audience. They sit in the dark and we are expected to do all the work, right? There's no back and forth. There's no rapport building. So it's a pretty daunting prospect, and it's a pretty steep learning curve. Of course, we're talking about learning today. So these are sort of the parameters with it, which we are faced with on day one of rehearsals. And you know, I think actors are misunderstood, actually. You know, we're thought to be these people who, you know, float around and overshare and hug each other an awful lot. We're creatives, or we're bohemian, or we're hippies, or we're overgrown children who should get a real job. Thank you, Granny. But actually, I think through the process of being broken down at drama school and poverty and rejection during your audition process, and then finally getting to a rehearsal room, I think that actors know a hell of a lot about learning new things. And today I want to talk about the two attitudes that we bring into that rehearsal room that I think are key for all of us here who wish to improve our opportunities for learning. So what are these two attributes that actors either develop, or perhaps we already have them, or a bit of both? I think these two attributes already mentioned by Vicky are vulnerability and trust. Now, before anyone starts rolling their eyes on vulnerability, because maybe Brené Brown is just too noisy at the moment and you've seen too many of her books on the shelves, how would I define vulnerability in this context for learning new things? Well, it doesn't have to mean pouring your heart out. It doesn't have to mean crying on cue, although I can. I'm a very well-trained actor. Vulnerability, I think, is just being comfortable not knowing stuff, right? Because if you've come on this call today, you're interested in learning new things. But we've got to be open and honest about what it is that we don't know. So I see an awful lot with the clients that I work with. So they come to me ostensibly to work on a presentation, and I say, okay, well, what's worrying you about this? And the number one answer is, I am worried I'm going to get a question I can't answer. We are terrified of just this idea of not knowing something, let alone the reality of standing there and someone asking us something and blank, I don't know how to answer that. So to me, getting more comfortable with that feeling of not knowing, of not having endless expertise, of being a person on a learning journey, I think that is a really powerful thing for us to sort of move towards. And I think that as actors, we do talk a lot about vulnerability and openness and wearing your heart on your sleeve. So how do we go about doing that I can hear my children have just found the door to this room. Hopefully they don't come in. How do we become more vulnerable or more comfortable with this not knowing? Well, that involves trust. And the cliche of a group of actors in a rehearsal room, which has probably been ripped off in many a sketch show, is everyone wearing black and kind of closing our eyes and falling back into the arms of another person, right? The trust exercise. And I always sort of laughed it off and thought, oh, there's so much more to our training than that. We don't just go around leaping into each other's arms doing trust exercises with blindfolds on. No. In fact, I think that my work in the corporate world just recently has made me realize why we approach acting projects the way that we do, with this big focus on building a team of people that trust each other implicitly. Because if we're going to walk out onto that stage, and as I said earlier, we can't confer during the show if it's going well. We've got to just get on with it, and I have to trust that that person over there is doing their job properly. So trust is very, very important for us. We do lots of physical, sort of psychological games around it in a rehearsal room. But then in our context today, how I can preach all day about let's be vulnerable, let's trust each other, but let's get practical, just as Lisa and Vicky have been sharing their very practical tips. How do we get practical about building trust within these learning groups? Well, I think it's a combination of two things to build trust. We need to be curious about each other, and we need to disclose stuff about ourselves. And we want a balance between those two things. Because no one likes someone that just talks about themselves the whole time, right? That's disclosure, but we've gone too far into disclosure, and we've got to pause and get curious about the other people around us. So if we find that balance, equally, you might find a person who only asks questions. The open questioning that Vicky was referring to, I mean, this sounds like such a glorious organic environment, right? To really force someone to ask questions of themselves by asking open questions of them. However, if you're only ever the one asking the questions and never disclosing anything, people start to shut down and say, well, I don't want to share anything more about me until I hear a bit about you. So I think, I guess these are quite simple concepts, really. But if we start to sort of examine that quite deliberately, in any learning environment, any new conversation or lab or any kind of groups that we're putting together, think about your role there. In order for the group to trust one another, which is the first step towards being vulnerable and really open-minded and learning new stuff, in order for that to happen, each individual has to be responsible for some disclosure. Let me tell you what's going on with me right now. And curiosity. Ooh, Lisa, tell me more about that. Vicky, let's explore that for you. Open questions. I've seen this. I've seen it in the training room. I've seen curious questioning being one of the toughest exercises that I have given people, because we love to ask questions that we already know the answers to. We love to control a conversation on narratives, to sort of predict where the conversation is going to go. Again, that's putting up our guard, and that's not being vulnerable. So the more vulnerable thing to do is to really learn how to ask great, curious questions. And then who knows where the conversation and the learning can go. So from my perspective, and digging around in my past and my training in theatre, these are the attributes that I wanted to talk about today. Working towards vulnerability and trust. And as we move into the next section of this meeting, which is into our small conversations, our small breakout rooms, think about that, just sort of to have a kind of internal note of, okay, how much am I disclosing and how much am I being the one asking those curious questions? Because it's so important for things to move forward and to have this wonderful learning blossom. That's all for me. I'm going to hand back to Daisy now. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. There were some really interesting stories about kind of how you worked in your organisations and with other organisations in lots of really different ways. Lisa, I loved what you were saying there about the labs, about kind of making it easy for people, but making sure that you had a relevant topic. So it's kind of like you need both of those things to come together, and that seemed to work really well for you in your kind of digital shop house and your lab scenario. And Vicky, kind of talking about action learning being quite a formal model, but what really struck me was the way that you kind of really made it work for you and your group. You were saying it doesn't have to be too formal, it doesn't have to be that staid thing, and you guys have managed to kind of keep together for 20 years doing that. And Victoria, I love what you were saying about that balance between kind of being curious but also having to kind of not completely only be curious, but also talk about yourself a bit, but not too much. So it's about finding kind of that balance to build that trust between people. That is kind of the essence to all of these situations. But now it's time to go over to you guys. We're going to have really small breakout groups here to give you a good amount of time to talk amongst yourselves. And each breakout group, we've given you 4 questions to work through, but you've only got about 15 minutes. So don't worry if you don't get through them all. It's just really a way to kind of prompt discussion. Each group will have a facilitator in the room. So the facilitator will be kind of in charge of capturing your answers to these questions so that we can share them with each other in kind of the brief few minutes that we'll have back together at the end. So the 4 questions that we have are: what were the 3 main ideas from the speakers that stood out for you? If you were to implement them in your organization, how do you think that they might help you to achieve your personal and or professional goals? So what would be the challenges that might stop you making progress? Because we've all heard about things that work for individuals, but they might not work for you. So what are the things that you might have to overcome? And what could you do next to get started? And to be honest, if the question that you feel most excited about is just that last one, I'm absolutely fine if you focus in on that one. And what the facilitators are going to do is they're going to be capturing your discussions in a tool called Padlet. So Helen's going to be sharing that into the chat. So feel free to open up Padlet, have a look at it, add your own thoughts and ideas if you want to, but also feel absolutely fine just to focus on the conversation in your groups. So we'll have 15 minutes together, and then me and the speakers will look at the ideas that you've shared and just have a bit of a summary at the end. But otherwise, that's it really. Just go into your group, work through the questions, and the facilitators will make sure that we're capturing it so we can all share afterwards. So I think Helen's okay to send you into the rooms now. Really, we can't share much from what you've had in those groups there, but it was just really fabulous to see all of the discussions that were happening. There's loads of post-it notes in the Padlet, so I would encourage you after the session to click on that link and just have a read through what everybody said. But a theme that really came through strongly for me is around that concept of trust and vulnerability that really resonated with you all. And we had somebody sharing how that can be quite tough to do. And I think people recognise that. It's not something that comes instantly or naturally all the time. It's something that we need to kind of build at and work at sometimes. And sometimes there are barriers or things that would stop people from being able to participate that we need to think about. Someone talked about the fact that they're a leader and perhaps there's only a certain level of vulnerability that they can show within their organisation. We also talked about kind of concepts of hierarchy, particularly across Western and more Asian cultures, such as Singapore's, and maybe not having different levels of the hierarchy in the same groups, which is something that is suggested in the formal kind of action learning set model. So do have a think when you're pulling a group of people together. What will help make that group buzz and put some of that thought in at the front? And another thing that you can try is, of course, going outside of your business, outside of your organisation to build those networks and think about where else you might be able to find those things. And Britcham is always happy to help in those circumstances if you're looking to build your networks. And we had some fantastic tips. So gain buy-in to ensure that you keep momentum. Make sure that you capture that learning so that people can use it and apply it on an ongoing basis. Share results, share kind of what a difference it's making for people to be committing their time and energies to this process, that it is making a difference, and keep people motivated and engaged, and kind of make sure that you do bring everyone on board in the beginning with those shared goals. And I love that a few of you had shared a few personal things that you're going to try and do as a result of the session. And that was just about putting yourself out there and joining more things and showing up and just being there and having that, you know, creative energy and that open mind to learning new things. And so I love the word that somebody used, the word courage. So is whether for you it's that courage to kind of show up, or whatever that courage might be for you. And when you know that you need a bit of courage, you know that you're learning, you know that you're pushing yourself into those new areas. So that's a good feeling that we really need to embrace. So I've seen that the Padlet's gone up in the chat, so you can have a look at that. And I just wanted to hand over to Victoria, who has a smashing thing for us to finish with. If we remember one thing from today.
Oh, here we go. No pressure. Thank you, Daisy. And I love that you highlighted the word courage popped out to me as well. But what popped out the most from Padlet was this huge list of challenges that we foresee in getting this learning going, and the completely blank column when it came to our goals. So I guess my soundbite is, don't talk yourself out of it before you know why you want to get into it. Focus on the goals and the benefits that you're going to reap in your personal life, in your professional life. And then, yes, you can be aware of those challenges. Please don't let them just get in the way and hold you back.
Amazing. Thanks so much for bringing yourselves and so much to this session, the speakers, the facilitators, and all of you who've attended and been so honest with us. I think that's us for today. Helen can share with you a few more upcoming events from Britcham, and I hope that you kind of keep that Padlet as a link for yourselves to remind yourself how to go forward and do some more of these things in your own organisations. Thanks very much, everyone.